What's the difference of strategic writing versus better writing?
Creative piece of writing, that's writing. In copywriting or strategic copywriting, I'm writing this thing with an intention to get an action.
Today on The Gaming Playbook, we are joined by Matt Barker, a master of digital copywriting, generating over £3 million in revenue for him and his clients with writing on LinkedIn and email. He is here to share the secrets to turning words into revenue using LinkedIn and social media.
You've written millions of words. I want to say sorry for your loss for your laptop, actually. If you think about the clients are the best who got it the quickest, like why do you think they get it quicker?
Confidence to actually just sit down and write. The difference between that and complete beginner is they would start writing something, hate it, delete it, and forget it forever.
What was one thing you'd say to old Matt like a year ago?
Good question. Stop getting distracted.
How? Please tell me how. What's the process of getting ideas to writing?
The strategy, because that's the most important part. Who am I actually writing to? Why am I writing it? Once you know that, it then allows you to start.
I want to start the podcast. We're going to get into social copywriting, a bit about your journey and making it a bit practical kind of steps what people can make. I want to start with how we met, which I thought was quite funny. Do you remember?
I do, yeah. It was your birthday party.
What
and
were you doing?
We were dancing.
We were dancing. Yes, we were.
Yes, we were, yeah.
Lovely. So I want to start because Cyprus is your base. Why did you choose Cyprus as your base?
We chose Cyprus because, we lived in London before. I'm from east of England somewhere. Moved to London about 6 years ago now. Lived there for 3 years, met my wife, Sarah in the process, and her family are based in Cyprus. She has a lot of family based here. So we moved towards the end of COVID, I think, or like 2021, late 2021, I think. And we came here, gave it a go, loved it, and then kind of decided to make it our permanent base. It's been really nice for especially building the business, focusing on that, not having the crazy distractions of London it's been quite nice.
Yeah, I think Cyprus is really good because if you want to do stuff, you can, but if you want to stay in your zone, there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, and it's a much healthier lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
Sun. The food is fresh.
Food's good. We're going to a taverna later, which will be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so little stuff like that is amazing.
Yeah.
I want to focus on the moment you actually went solo. So you became a solopreneur, which from my memory was before you moved to Cyprus. Can you tell me the moment you went solo?
I think it was October 2020 or 21, I can't remember now. So my background, I worked in marketing for 10 years. Worked for 2 8-figure companies. One was, I think, garden retailing. Worked for them for a long time, 8 years. And then the second company was in London. They were a telecoms company, I'll say. There was nothing dodgy about it. Don't know why I said I'll say. They sold SIM cards and stuff like that. Very boring. But worked for them. COVID happened. I was stuck at home. And I wasn't really that satisfied with the trajectory of where I would probably go in that company.
Why?
There was what was it? I think marketing communication or marketing campaign manager. So all the campaigns that we would run with brands, we worked with O2, Vodafone, all these brands to deliver their marketing campaigns in shops, which was great, learned a lot. But the way the company was structured, it was there was a fairly small company. So it was salespeople, admin, and then me and 2 others. And then it was just director and owners. So there wasn't I wasn't just going to all of a sudden become partner of the company or something like that. So it was very much you're just at this level and you have to work pretty hard to grow your role and then potentially build a team underneath you or something like that.
Did you want to do that?
Well, clearly not, because I left in October, which I think was 2 years after I joined. And I left because it was in COVID. We'd been at home working, and the office was going to move to outside of London, which wasn't something I wanted to do. I didn't want to move outside of London. I was pretty happy there. So I said I want to. Me and Sarah had already decided that we wanted to move to Cyprus at this point to get out of our studio flat. and come and live here. So I handed my notice in. Actually, I don't think I handed my notice in. I said, I'm stuck at home and we have no office to go to. So do you mind if I move to Cyprus and work from Cyprus?
That's mad. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I literally did the same thing.
And what did they say to you?
They said, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, they said no to me.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't as lucky. They said no. So I was like, okay. So I like thought about it and we were discussing it and I was like, it's not like like I just described, like there's no real like trajectory to really like progress there. And it's not something that I feel passionate about. So I handed my notice in, worked a month. I think we moved to Cyprus. I worked a month, the remaining month in Cyprus. And I was like, okay, that was the point where I was like, now I need to try and make some money somehow. Done a couple of interviews at companies here, which I don't speak a word of Greek, which was quite difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine how hard that was, especially knowing it probably didn't last long, that job hunt.
No, I looked for about a month max, I think, if that. And then I was kind of thinking, I was like, okay, well, the company that I used to work for back home, where I worked for like 8 years, they always used to have these copywriters on hand, freelance copywriters, because they had this website which was full of had 10,000 products which they sell, plus all these different categories. And for each one, they had a landing page and they had copy on each landing page. So like these copywriters would just be working every day, writing new copy for all these existing landing pages and new products which they had coming in. So I was like, okay, I'll just reach out to them, see if they have something or have some space.
So it is in Cyprus, no job, and you remembered that, and then you just started to reach out to them to see if they have more copywriting.
Yeah, because the guy who at the time of when I reached out, I used to work for him. He was my manager, and since then he became director. So I reached out to him and I was like, I need a little job. Is there any kind of space for copywriting? And he said, yeah, we can get you some work, which was great. So I'd done that from October till about January or even Feb, maybe even a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And it was in January where I was like, okay, I'm gonna try copywriting as a freelancer, my own business, get clients somehow doing whatever copywriting I could find. And in tandem with making that decision was starting to post on LinkedIn, and that's where that kind of started.
Yeah, and I want to fast forward for people at home. Where are we now?
Where are we now? In my business or?
Yeah, because you started copywriting, but I think you do a bit more than just copywriting.
Yeah, so it started out as copywriting, so writing for people. I think one of the first gigs I got was, it was writing. One of them was actually a LinkedIn post. It was like what was a really early version of what people do carousels as now, but it was really bad. For a small business who doesn't know anything about social media. So as you can expect, it was terrible. And another one was, I think, writing a kind of an email sequence for some kind of horticultural subscription service. I can't quite remember, but
sounds like odd jobs.
Yeah, it was just odd jobs for a good few months. And then it progressed into ghostwriting. So writing for business owners, mainly agency owners, I found. So writing their actual LinkedIn content for them, because from January up until it was July, I got my first ghostwriting client. So it took 6 months to get that first ghostwriting client, which was on a retainer. So I would write their LinkedIn posts for them as their ghostwriter. Got a few more clients, done that for about a year, and then kind of fast forwarding to now. I don't do any ghostwriting anymore, and I mainly help business owners actually write better copy themselves. So I coach them on their actual copywriting, their content strategy, content marketing as a kind of whole, because over the last 3 years I've kind of obsessed over those three kind of buckets. So I've got a lot to share with certain people. So I'm doing a lot less of the actual writing for people and kind of working with them to guide them and help them with improving their own writing.
Perfect. So we're going to get into how to kind of get better at writing today. And I want to make sure we're not humbling too much, because like in your headline, it says you've driven £2 million worth of business. So you've written millions of words. I want to say sorry for your loss for your laptop, actually. So your laptop died recently, right?
Yeah, it
so,
did.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I had that for a long time, but it was only 2 years.
So, and it still died.
It was just, yeah, it was
Writes a lot.
so slow. Yeah. And, you know, marks on the keyboard, and it was like wearing down and stuff.
You did a really cool post recently, and I want you to explain it. So you mentioned how we were taught to write in high school is different how to write online.
Mm.
So for someone who's newer to writing, can you please explain that sentence?
Yeah, so
I want to start the podcast. We're going to get into...
It's essays, you know, like alternative stories, or like alternative beginnings to like Frankenstein, for example. And everything is based around word count, you know, like the indents that you put on paragraphs, how big or small your paragraphs are, the way you like structure your kind of analysis of something, which is still really helpful. But it's very much like more words. It's primarily word count based, and it's all, you know, it's you write something, you give it to the teacher, they grade it, you get it back, that's it. But the difference with that and when you're writing for a business, or even just writing online in any way, is it's not about word count. It's the complete opposite. You know, a lot of it is saying less. An example of that, which actually isn't online writing, but like if you look at a newspaper, journalists get paid a lot of money to write, to basically sum up like a breaking world story in 5 words. And when you actually really look at that headline, often actually doesn't really make that much sense as a headline. But
it's not like a real sentence sometimes.
Yeah, but the keywords involved is like emotional word, an enemy of some sort. There's like these, it's like keywords, and those keywords are enough to trigger people to pay attention to it. And then when they write the rest of the story, it's again condensing this whole big world story into like 250 or 500 words. They're having to be as concise as possible, use the exact word that they need to summarize something that they would normally say in like 10, 20 words, but in like 1 word, 2 words. So there's this whole skill around how can you just say less, but say exactly the same thing. So that's like something that I'm always striving to do. That's always something that I'm trying to like rein myself in on.
I think that explains it. Like the thing with a newspaper, it's like the hook, which is to get our attention, is that headline. But then I just thought of it now, like they physically don't have enough space to write more words. So
no,
they have
it's like
that
the
constraint.
tiniest little columns, yeah. And it's similar with social, right? Like we all look at things on our mobile.
Yeah.
There's a width to your mobile.
It's almost even letter count, let alone word count sometimes. Like if there's a big word that would be cooler in the sense like it's more expressive, but don't care. Like we need to go.
Yeah.
So when we're looking to write online, I feel like today we have a unique challenge in that there's so many ways to write, where even a year ago, the prolific nature of like AI wasn't as much. When I was writing, the only thing I had was, here's how I started writing, by the way. I looked at your content, I took it, and then I was like, how do I make this my story? And then I did that for the first couple months. That's what actually got me started.
That's still how I write.
Yeah, wow.
And it's exactly how I learn as well. Just looking at what someone else had written, trying to emulate it. And then the next time, if you keep doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah, it took me 2 months and then I stopped.
Yeah.
I still do it every now and then, but this is funny. Maybe we just answered the question, but how would you recommend someone to start writing knowing that they have all these options? Like maybe what should they ignore?
Not sure about what they should ignore, but for me, and the way I always advise people to learn is pretty much what you just said. Like when I started writing, copywriting, I was learning the whole skill like completely fresh, like having, like even though I had all this marketing background, I knew how marketing worked and the kind of some of the psychology around it. But I'd never really like obsessed into like one of the sub niches of marketing copywriting. So like it was this whole new thing to kind of get really good at. And the way I learned that was going out of my way to find people who were talking about the topic, people who I thought were doing it well, and copy that I was reading frequently, and then just emulating how they're writing. So, there's obviously Justin Welsh, who's a big creator on LinkedIn. The way he writes is exactly what we're talking about. It's like 5 to 10 word sentences, often like 2 or 3 words, and it's just boom, 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 really quick, and you can scan through it really quickly. So it's writing like that from a few different people who I was kind of watching and trying to emulate because I just enjoyed the way they wrote, specifically on LinkedIn, but social in general. Because for me at the time, that was where I was putting all my focus in, trying to use social to grow my business and using writing as the kind of skill to do that. So yeah, it was just kind of, observing a few people who were writing well or were talking about writing, learning from them, absorbing as much as possible, and, not always making templates of their posts that I liked, but creating templates that you can go back to very often that are going to help you if you are on days where you're like, I just can't think of anything to write. Like, I haven't got much energy for this. It just helps you write quicker. And when you keep doing it over and over and over again, you build this kind of mental practice and this kind of muscle memory that you can sit down and you just find yourself writing in that way.
Yeah.
It's the same with like dancing. Sarah, my wife, she's a dancer, and she has to do things over and over and over and over again. Same move. So until it becomes muscle memory. It's the same with kind of any practice I find. And copywriting is no different. So you just have to practice, do the same thing over and over again, and eventually it'll become muscle memory. And that's how I learn, and that's generally how I would advise anyone to either start writing or improve their writing.
When you're looking at your coaching clients, because I've had this where I've coached people on how to write, and I've tried it in different ways. I've tried to give them like AI to help them templatize to get going, but I found that sometimes that could lead to a bit of overwhelm. So my question is, if you think about the clients are the best, who got it the quickest, like why do you think they get it quicker than someone who just started writing, but it's taken them maybe a month or 2 to actually kind of get that writing online part?
I think, a lot of the people that I work with have already started writing. So I'm not necessarily taking them from 0 to 1. I'm kind of taking them from like 1 to 5.
Okay.
Because you can go.
So what is the difference of 1 and 5?
So the difference from 1 to 5 is a lot of it, I think, is confidence to actually just sit down and write something and not have that kind of like, oh, does this sound stupid? Like one of my clients, for example, he's at a point with his writing where he'll just send me something which for me to give feedback and audit. And he'll write a note at the top saying, I don't really like this, but and I think the tone is all wrong, but just tell me what you think. And to be able to actually write something, not really feel that confident, not really enjoy it that much, but then send it to someone to get feedback, I think that takes a lot of confidence.
Yes,
and that says where you are in terms of your skill level with a skill, to be able to do it, just get it done to a point where you may not necessarily be happy with it, but be willing to then improve it. The difference between that and a complete beginner is they would start writing something, hate it, delete it, and forget it forever. And then it would never see the light of day. No one can give them any feedback. They don't know if it's good or bad. It could have been the best thing ever written, but no one's ever going to see it because they haven't got this mindset of like, I'm just going to post it, I'm going to send it to someone, show some people, and just see what comes of it. So it's that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the feedback loops. Like if I speak to some people who's like they haven't done a post that they've posted in 6 months, but they've written a lot, or they've had 0 feedback loops in 6 months, but you have the person who maybe they write 3 out of 10 content versus that person's 5 out of 10, but the 3 out of 10 got posted and could become 8 out of 10 very quickly with the feedback loops.
For sure. And I think like if someone can get the general words down of what they want to say, then you can do so much more from that. But if you don't have it to work with and improve, then it's really hard because you have to then build it all from scratch, and you obviously have that whole confidence and mindset thing to grapple with. So you know, a lot the things that I tend to find myself repeating a lot with my clients is the hook. It's like, are you structuring that in the best way that you can? Are you actually structuring your writing in a way that is taking the reader on the kind of emotional journey that they need to be taken on?
Is that every post?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Pretty much, yeah. I've definitely found the more I've learned about writing and the more I've written, it's a lot more about what order are your words in, not necessarily what words you choose.
Tell me more.
There is a word choice element to it, obviously. Like we said, like if you're going to pick a long word that nobody understands versus a really basic one that everyone understands, then
my go-to is like reading grade 3.
Yeah.
If you use Hemingway, there's a few tools that do it.
Yeah.
It really helps because sometimes I write, I'm like, oh, this is easy, and then I double check, I'm like, oh, they literally make the post like.
Yeah. And that's another thing, like people read to a much lower level than we all seem to think. And
also, I think it's also easier to read at that level for people who can read, which is, even that alone is a very good benefit.
Yeah. And that's another kind of thing of like a beginner versus someone who's a bit more experienced or has at least started kind of writing and enjoying it. It's like the beginner thinks they have to be really clever. They think they need to really impress someone. They think they really need to be like tell the whole thing, and you know,
like here's what I know from the thesaurus.
Yeah, they need to come across as this like I know, like
that's what we had to do at school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That.
So it comes back to that.
So you have to unlearn all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like ingrained in you from growing up that you need to write in this way, but you just completely have to flip it. So then the people who are a bit more experienced, they know that, and the more basic or more simple you can write, the more people will actually be able to read it. The easier they'll be able to read it, the faster they'll be able to read it. Your writing suddenly becomes easy to read for a lot of people, as opposed to difficult to read for a lot of people. So you kind of naturally, the more you simplify your writing, you open up your writing to a huge audience, as opposed to a smaller audience that could, just on a basis of, can the reader understand this? Can they actually read it? It's like one of the things I've said a lot is like the first thing you need to do, or the at minimum, is just be understood by the person reading it. Can they understand what you're reading?
That's funny, because I haven't thought that as a step, and I looked at the client's posts that I've done recently, and some of them I wrote, and then the next day I looked at it, I was like, this is taking way too long to be like, why is this post a thing? Kind of thing. And then I looked at the hook, I was like, it's because it just took that much time to explain what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, I just need to be understood here, so let's not give them 100 words to get into to understand why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's another kind of part of, you know, these things I kind of work with clients with, and when I order their post, it's like the hook, so we've just covered, and then the structure, and kind of, you know, what can we, if you're taking this long to say something, can we just get rid of like 50% of this? Because you're just wasting people's time.
I feel like we've covered the individual post, and I think a lot of people make great individual content, but the overall strategy is a bit amiss. And you wrote this in a post recently where there's the strategic writing element, and then there's like become a better writer element. So what's the difference of strategic writing versus like better writing?
Yeah, so that it feels like to me there's a difference between writing and copywriting, which is kind of, you know, similar, strategic writing and writing. writing is more, to me, it's more like cathartic. You know, you're writing to express an opinion, to, you know, like a blog, for example. If you're like,
get it out.
yeah, or like journaling, something like that. To me, that's writing. Or like a novel, or, you know, some kind of creative piece of writing. That's writing to me. In copywriting or strategic copywriting, to me, that's, I'm writing this thing with an intention to get like an action, which direct response copywriting. So that's like the same thing. So it's like, what am I writing here, and what do I actually want to get out of it? So for example, if I'm writing a story kind of post on any social platform, LinkedIn, for example, what do I want people to actually feel from that? What do I want people to read it and then do or think or feel? If you're writing something that's a bit more personal, like a story, then you kind of want them to feel like they like you more, or they know you more, or they trust you more. They see you as this person. You're writing to them through a computer screen. It could be anyone. They could be lying. So you need to kind of build this kind of trust and kind of likability. And then the other end of the scale is like, if I'm running a business, am I working with clients? If I am, can I write a post which is showing other people who would potentially want to work with me, similar to the clients who I want to work with? Can I write something about a client that I'm working with now and a result they've gotten, to use the kind of social proof tactic and get them to kind of start desiring my services? So if I show them how good a result I'm getting with a client that I'm working with now, someone who is a similar kind of ICP profile, hopefully they'll also want the same, and they'll want to reach out to me or book a call or blah, 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 blah. So it's all about like, what can I write and what's the action that I want someone to do afterwards?
As a ghostwriter, I'm looking at what's the outcome of this post. The way I do it is simple: top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. I call it attract, nurture, convert. What you've just illustrated there is like, there's different reasons to write. When someone's new to writing, I feel like this part takes time for them to realize like, oh, this idea could become this. I think people don't realize how much kind of the personal stories can actually turn into a direct sales copy or what have you. So my question here is, you want to become a strategic writer, and I want to get outcomes, let's say to likability. Do you need that outcome in mind before you write, do you feel? Like, what's the process of getting ideas to writing and then kind of like putting them in the different buckets?
A lot of the kind of process and system that I teach clients, which is also what my course teaches, the digital copywriter, the whole first kind of thing that we go through is like the strategy, because that's the most important part. Like you just said, it's like, who am I actually writing to? Like, who do I want to read this? Why am I writing it? Once you know that, it then allows you to start following the research. And like, for how I done that and how I do it with my writing and how I always advise people to research is, you need to go and find these people who you've figured out that you want to write for. Go and ask them a set of questions like, what sort of things do you struggle with? What motivations do you have? What desires do you have? All these kind of different questions. They'll come back to you with some answers, and then all of a sudden you have this whole kind of set of data with pain points that you can talk about and solutions that you can start talking about and creating content around. So you can pick 5 people to go and perform this research on. You get 20 to 50 sets of kind of data points that you can start writing from. Then that then gives you these buckets of topics that you can all start writing about. And within those, then you can start ideating on different sort of angles that you want to write about, like ideas, observations, step-by-step processes and systems, and all these kind of different things you can write about. But it's starting with who you actually want to write for and what you want to get out of it and what they want to get out of it that enables you to then start writing with intention.
So we checked that box, we've done the research, we've got our buckets of topics and also the pain points. What do people get wrong in your experience after that? Because I feel like that step, we check that box, but then I think people start to lose their way sometimes.
Yeah, it's getting bored with
Really?
writing about the same thing.
Is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I think especially if you have a business that you're trying to leverage, say you're trying to leverage social for growing your business, you want to get inbound inquiries for your service or product or whatever it is. If you get bored about talking about these topics which matter to the people who are eventually, hopefully, going to be buying your service or buying your product, if you get bored of talking about those things and start talking about random other stuff, then they're not going to be interested in what you're writing about anymore. So all of a sudden, you don't have this target audience of people who you're writing to, and you're not nurturing them and keeping them interested in you and your business. So that's where people go wrong. They'll write about these topics for X amount of time, and they'll get bored, and then they'll start veering off, and they have to try and either rein themselves back in, or they have to try and fix whatever they're doing. That's the main battle. And it's even something I struggled with as well, like that I think I wrote about it recently. There was about a year where I just didn't enjoy writing my content on LinkedIn.
A year? Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, because I was really using frameworks a lot and just like sticking to the frameworks, writing about the same topics like over and over and over again, which was great. It like built my audience, and I was, generating inquiries and all these kind of good things. But for me, I've loved writing since I was like a kid, like in high school. I loved doing like the creative writing about stories and all that kind of stuff. So being a writer now is actually something that I've always wanted to do, and I love doing it. And it's got to a point now with my business where I'm like, I don't necessarily need to be writing that really strategically focused stuff to get more business. I still want to get more business and grow my business, but I also found that after a year of doing that and feeling a bit like I'm not enjoying this, I need to introduce a bit of the stuff that I actually enjoy talking about. So there's like finding that balance as well of like, if I talk about if I'm posting 3 or like 5 times a week on social, can I give like 2 posts a week where I just write about anything that I enjoy writing about? It makes me happy. And then the other 3 times is for my audience, these strategic pieces of copy that are going to generate a response.
Feels like you said it's the biggest problem is getting bored, but I feel like you had a whole year of that feeling. But then you also gave the solution, which is to have the content that you kind of need to do, which is hitting the same kind of drum. But then you mentioned you then started infusing the stuff you did enjoy. So would you say that's the solution? Like you have the balance and you just keep that going? Is that the solution here?
I think it totally depends on what your goal is, which is, again, comes back to that kind of what I was talking about, the first module of the course that I have, which is completely around the strategy and figuring out why you want to write online and why you want to become a better copywriter.
I have a question. The goals. So you've been through a lot of, journeys with your clients, and they have had different goals. Is there 2 like very different goals, and like what's the difference when it comes to writing?
I think there's what I find when I tend to work with, there's kind of 2 different types of businesses. It's like people like yourself and me who are kind of running a one-person business, or with a one-person business with a couple of team members who they outsource to, for example, where your primary goal is to write content that gets you new business, and is very geared towards like, I am the business, the content is me, but it's also for generating new business. And then there's also the kind of the complete opposite of that, where there's like, it could be the CEO of a multi 7-figure business or 8-figure business. They've got a team, they've got the whole company, it's growing. They're essentially just sitting back and kind of being
the operator.
Yeah, the operator. So then writing online for them becomes it's not necessary, because they've grown the business, essentially. They've done all the hard work they need to. It's not a necessity. It's not something that they need to do, but it's something that's a should do, and like something that would be good to do. So with that in mind, it then becomes this kind of more of a long-term thing of like, how can I just build an audience around me? And people can just find out about me. And then, over 10, 15 years, how big of an audience can I get online that is just going to help me and my personal brand, and, become something that I could, me being this CEO of an 8-figure company, something that I could then, monetize completely separate to my company. So it becomes this kind of, I guess it's kind of short-term, long-term, and kind of how invested you are in the content itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with the goal of, I'm using the example of a company, because I write for CEOs of companies, and some of those companies are, like you said, multi 7 figures, but they always come to me, mainly because that's what I keep talking about. It's probably I don't work with the others that don't, but they want leads, they want business. They do want to build likability, but they still want business. Hearing what you're saying, like building the brand around them, I find that's a challenge sometimes. I've had this recently where I have one client who, he used a funny word, it's like emo content. So I'm not comfortable doing the emo content. And then with my perspective, it's him sharing a story where he's like, but I've never done this before, I don't want to do it. And I think that's such a big part of the success that we've had, is we have that emo content, which is basically more personal stories with takeaway. What do you say to that person who's like, I don't know how I feel about all this personal stuff, I just want to talk about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like if you don't feel comfortable talking about that, then that's like, all right, that's, if you can see what would come of talking about that kind of content, and that's something that you want to get to, if that's a goal that you want to hit, and the thing in the way is writing personal content, then I think you need to start writing personal content and get over that. But if it's just not you, and you don't really see the end goal of doing that as something that you want, then don't do it. Like, no one's forcing you to do it. You can just be really targeted and just build a really targeted audience around this specific topic that isn't necessarily reliant on you to be the face of it. You can just be an expert who's putting out content that is helpful around this specific niche. But yeah, it's going to be more difficult for people to, emotionally kind of attach themselves to your content, because they're not seeing a face behind it. It's just words on a screen. It could be anyone. So you have to kind of work harder with the words you write to build in this kind of emotional side to it that people can connect with and that sort of thing.
So I'm thinking of a specific client now, and despite the fact that they might not want to do the personal content that's like on its own outside of his main domain, it then makes it, well, he never used to put stories into his educational posts. It's more like, here's some data, here's some thoughts, enjoy. Where we established earlier, you need to be emotional story writing, in a sense. You need to make the person feel something, which is very hard if you're doing only expert level topics. If we're talking to that person, like, how do we get the emotional storytelling in to something that could be like very dry, like making a number go up by 2% on a game, in my example. So how do we bring that emotional storytelling in for someone who's naturally doesn't feel comfortable with it?
I think so I definitely didn't feel comfortable doing that when I first started writing online. I think it was several months before I even put a picture of myself. Obviously I had the little picture of me on my profile, but yeah, it was several months before I was putting like pictures of me or what I was doing and telling stories of my life. I've always, wherever I've worked, I've always kind of kept my personal life completely separate to work. And I always saw that exactly the same with what I'm doing now. But the way I found it become a lot easier was using frameworks to write, because all of a sudden your story isn't a story, it's just a process. So you kind of emotionally detach from it being this kind of emo content that you talk about. And it more just becomes all right, what's this thing that I've done that I can put in this part of the framework? What's the next part of it? And it just becomes a system and a process, as opposed to I'm just crying online.
I want to take the topic to a bit of LinkedIn. Just want to get your opinion on something. You wrote a post, which I thought was funny. You said the word scamfluencer.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like, what is a scamfluencer to you? Like, what's bad writing versus good writing?
Yeah, so what I meant by scamfluencer was you'll see these posts which say how to make $10 million in 1 week or something like that. It's massively over exaggerated.
Good hook.
Great hook, gets people to pay attention to it, but not very, respectful to the reader, because it's they're painting this picture of something which is actually incredibly difficult, and they're making it look incredibly easy. And that kind of does two things. It makes the reader feel oh, if that's that easy, then I should definitely be doing that. And that, when they have that reaction, they then want to, it's when they then get proposed with, oh, I have a course which can help you do this thing. It kind of creates this feeling of a kind of lack of self-worth. So they think that they're not doing a very good job and that they should be doing this thing because it's really easy. So then they feel coerced to buy this course to help them do that. But in reality, the course is not going to help them do that, because the person who's writing about making 10 million in whatever, they've spent years and years and years getting to that point. And then the second thing that it does, it actually just devalues everything that the person writing it has actually built and done for themselves. So if they are this really successful person who's, at a point where they're generating $1 million a month or whatever, it's what does that say about your whole journey? If it's taken 10, 12, 15 years to get there, you're making it seem incredibly easy and that everyone should be able to do this.
Why did it take you 10 years?
Why did it take you 10 years? Yeah. If you could do it in 6 months, then why didn't you do it in 6 months? So that's why I think there's a scamfluencer sense of it. It's over exaggerating the whole scam side of it, but it is a bit of a scam, because it's it's making something seem incredibly easy when it isn't. And that makes people want to give you money.
Well, I have a follow-up question here. I think you'd be very well placed to answer it. It's guess how long does it take on average to get good at, let's say, online writing? Because you probably have people who pick it up like that, and people pick it up in maybe months, maybe years. So maybe you can dispel that. How long does it take to get good at online writing?
Yeah, it's hard to put a timeline on it.
How about this, to make it a bit easier? How long would it take to get results that the average person will be happy with?
It's going to take you several months. But it completely depends on how much time you have to dedicate to that thing. If you're busy running a business or whatever, and you have half an hour a day, or even if you can't even do that, half an hour every Thursday or something, it's not just enough to write. You have to dive into the whole social media thing, build your network out, connect with people and find who these people are who are actually going to support your content. Because if you just write stuff and post it with no audience, you're not really, there's no audience for it, so it's not going to be seen. I think
it's hard to get the feedback loop without that mini core audience, because then you wouldn't really know what is good, if you are improving.
Yeah, and there's definitely, obviously different social platforms have different algorithms, and you can have 10 followers, post something, and it can just blow up. But a lot of that is luck. It's not necessarily...
Can't rely on it.
Yeah, it's not a predictable way to find success. So certainly the way I found success with it was just from being on the social platform every day, building my network out and finding people who I could speak to, connect with, people who are on similar kind of paths to me, struggling with the same things. And you just kind of eventually start supporting each other. And if you're writing constantly, then it just has this kind of effect of you become part of this bubble where you're all supporting each other and that sort of thing. And then that's how your growth kind of starts. So it's kind of manufacturing an audience for your writing as opposed to just writing, leaving it.
Yeah, I think it just makes it take 6 months less time than it should.
Yeah.
And I think just to make that really clear, because I've had to do this for clients, done for them. And LinkedIn's crazy platform in the sense that pretty much everyone's a real person. You can see their whole CV and you get 100 connection requests a week for free. It's $400 a month, around 25% accept, 100 new people a month who are probably going to accept and then see your content. So you could build a mini audience over 3 months relatively quickly. You just need to put a bit of extra effort at the start, build the list. And then, like you said, then you can actually test your writing. I think that's the important thing. You need a way to check if you are getting better. And you can't, there was a person talking yesterday who said they've been writing for 6 months and they don't know what's going wrong. I was like, well, there's no critical mass yet to actually check if this post was a flop, this post was a hit kind of thing.
You know, certainly for business, if your version of success is, you know, generating new business opportunities and new inquiries, if you're running a business that has like a sales cycle of like a year or 2 years, then you're probably going to have to be doing it for like 5 years to really start seeing something consistent from it, because these sales cycles take so long.
But there's so many side benefits.
Yeah, for people to discover you, to then get to a point where they're like, I'm ready to reach out to this person.
Yeah, purely inbound. Like I have a couple clients where it's literally they do 1 or 2 deals a year.
Yeah.
And I'm writing for them why they keep renewing, because they're getting a lot of mini side benefits. And he makes all the other stuff in their life a bit easier. Like if they go to a conference, someone might actually recognize them. So I think a lot of people might measure their success on writing is, I will write until I get an inbound lead and make money. Like, well, there's all these other stuff that's becoming. Some people, one client told me, I enjoy it for the experience of reflecting on stories and the lessons. Like that alone is a benefit. So maybe because of the Scamfluencer hooks, people make the belief that my writing will just generate cash. It's like, well, maybe, but you get all these other benefits which are important too.
Yeah, and that, you know, those kind of Scamfluencer type people, they generally they're running a business that is completely based around selling broad offers that apply to almost anyone in the world at a low price. That, yeah, it's a very broad audience. But if you are running a business that is a lot more niche and isn't anything like that, and you actually have a very specific type of person who you need to work with or is going to be interested in your offer, that approach is just not, it's not right for you, because it doesn't align with what your strategy should be.
Yeah. Moving on to 2025, because your business has evolved a lot in 2024. What's coming up? What are you going to be up to? What are you going to be focusing on?
So I'm looking at, so for the last year, I've kind of been in this place of, I've grown an audience of like 150,000 on LinkedIn and slowly growing on other platforms. So I've got that kind of broad audience, but I'm still set up to work one-to-one with people, which requires a more niche approach. So I've kind of been in this kind of bit in between of, I have a broad audience and I can create broad offers that would make me money and still be able to help a lot of people.
Which you do with the digital
Which I do with courses and that sort of thing. But I still put a lot of time into working one-to-one with people, coaching and trying to get new clients for that offer. But that person who I would work with one-to-one is at a completely different stage to someone who would buy a course from me.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, I'm trying to do both things, and I'm positioning myself in the wrong way. So I'm kind of looking to long term be more writing as a whole online. Like, I can help you make money writing online, as opposed to I can help this specific person get this specific outcome for your business. So I'm kind of looking more long term of how can I build my business around products, more scalable offers for myself that are going to help people become better writers, not just for generating inbound leads for their business, but for, building an audience or getting invited onto a podcast or, writing emails in your work, for example. Like, so all these different parts of writing, which is actually going to help people in lots of different areas, as opposed to just growing a business with inbound leads.
Yeah, because you've got the tree of writing, and then you've got the branches, loads of stuff to get into.
Yeah.
Which sounds like you're only focusing mostly on that thing. So yeah, plenty to go out there. Very exciting. One final thing is, what is one thing you'd say to old Matt like a year ago?
Good question. Stop getting distracted.
How? Please tell me how. Please tell me now.
Still figuring that out. If something's working, do more of it. Stop getting distracted. Like I was telling you before this, there's this guy, Derek Johansson, he runs a course called Copy Hour. He has been running that course for 12 years. It started out as just a £20 challenge to get some people involved and build up accountability. He's then been improving that course for 12 years up to what it is now. That requires such an unbelievable amount of consistency and just dedication into saying, I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to make it really good. And then naturally that will become a very good product. So if he was getting distracted with all these different things along the way, that might have never happened. But the fact that he stuck with that for 12 years and it is what it is now, like a 7-figure business, that's pretty amazing. So yeah, I think, if you can just stick with one thing and just try and do that really, really well, then that's probably the advice I'd give myself.
Yeah, no, great advice. Thank you, Matt. And final question, how should people get in touch?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name's Matt Barker. And you can then sign up to my newsletter, The Digital Writer, and we can chat over that as well.
Perfect. Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you.